As promised, we are running through every season in the history of college football and rewriting the wrongs, resetting college football national championships. We did this a few years ago. Don't remember exactly what off season we went through and started with whatever current year it was at the time, maybe 2021, 22, something in that range, about 3 or 4 years ago, and then went back in time and got back to the early 70s. So we are going to do our darndest to make it all the way back to the beginning of college football. So settle in, and the call-in line is open. There is one rule, and the only rule is that if you call in, you're talking about and going to ask questions and make comments and analysis and discussion about the season that we are discussing at that point. That's the only thing you can call about. We are not going to screw up our show, record our live stream by talking about seasons that are not on the table at the current time. So do appreciate you stopping by here at the Voice of College Football. The most effective way that you can contribute here at the Voice of College Football to keep us going, and we don't want to just keep going because that's what we've been doing for far too long, is that you can contribute financially here at the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Why would you not do that? Amazon is the link. Please, when you use Amazon, when you shop on Amazon, use the link that we provide there in the description section down below of this video and all the videos here at the Voice of College Football, because we would like to do this for a long, long time and not shut down anytime soon. All right, we're going to go through the national championship seasons. We're going to start with 2024. Also, the most effective way to contribute here at the Voice of College Football is to go to Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Those links are in the description section as well. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. We appreciate your contributions. All right. I love doing this. And we will go through the entirety of college football. So let's get started. Here we go. Buckle in. And again, the call-in line is here. So we start easy. We start with 2024. And I'm going to tell you, spoiler alert, I'm not changing any national championships from 2014 on. There's not going to be any change to national championships. However, there are some things to be considered. There are definitely things to be considered. So we post the final rankings from 2024. And here they are. That looks to be about as well as I can blow that up. So go all the way to the right side of the screen. No, we can move it on over. So the importance of the final rankings are obvious, but also the importance of the next to final rankings, the college football playoff rankings. Now, what we have here, are these the AP rankings? Yes, let's go to the college football playoff selection committee's rankings. So let's take this all the way to the final results. And so these final results are going into the playoff, obviously. So let's make it clear. There was a 12-team playoff, and Ohio State won the national championship. And this is my contention when there is a playoff, and especially a 12-team playoff, and we are soon to see a 16-team playoff, is that much like the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NHL, the NBA, and other sports, if you have a legitimate playoff system, once the teams have reached the playoff, then everybody's 0-0. Some teams may have an advantage because they had a better regular season, so they're at home or they have a bye. But other than that, everybody's slates are clear, and simply who wins the tournament is the national champion. And in no way were the 14 playoffs anything close to this 12-team playoff in regards to, okay, if you can't make a 12-team playoff, you probably don't have much of a gripe or complaint to make about not having an opportunity to win a national championship. Once we get back to the 14 field, we may present some cases for some teams that would have not necessarily a gripe that we would move all the way to awarding them a national championship, but at least notating in our final rundown that they were denied a chance to win the college football playoff. So, do you have any issue with who made the playoff? Yes, I do believe that Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Alabama with 9-3 records had much stronger resumes than SMU at 11-2 as the ACC championship game loser, and even stronger resumes than Indiana at 11-1 against a horrendously poor schedule. Just terrible schedule. Best team they beat was Nebraska. Well, Michigan 7-5, Nebraska 6-6 in the regular season. But if you're 9-3 and there are 12-0 teams, 13-0 teams, meaning Oregon making it to the playoff, you certainly have no gripe. And so our final results for 2024 are pretty clear cut. I have no issue with anything here, and Ohio State is the national champion. Now, if we want to, why is that doing that? So anyway, why can't I get that to show the record? So now some people would say if we apply the previous poll era to the 2024 season, then you could vote all sorts of different teams the national champion. You may vote Oregon the national champion because they have the best record and they split 2 games with Ohio State. But again, from my vantage point, the way I'm going to judge this, especially this season in 2024 and going forward, is that if you can't make a 12 or 16 team playoff or can't win that, then you have no gripes in the national championship race. You know, we could have a season, it's possible, where we could have an undefeated team in the regular season, then win the conference championship game, be 13-0, and there be no other 1-loss teams in the field. And you could have a bunch of 2-loss teams in the field and 3-loss teams and an undefeated team. And one of those 2 or 3-loss teams beat the undefeated team and go on to win the national championship. And the 1-loss team having a much better record than everybody else, but they did not win the tournament. So Ohio State is the rightful champion in 2024. And we could just note that there is an argument that Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina, and BYU, and possibly even Illinois have better resumes than SMU and Indiana. But that's such a stretch to work them into a 12-team field. It doesn't hold water. So that's where we stand for 2024. Pretty easy. This starts out easy, and it's going to get more and more difficult. So let's move it on to 2023. And again, I've got the call-in line available. And there was just one criteria, and that's that we discuss the season we're on. All right, for 2023, so the obvious issue here is that Florida State went undefeated. Now, don't misconstrue what I'm trying to get accomplished here. What we are trying to get accomplished here is determining who is the rightful national champion, or in these playoff seasons, are there teams that had rightful claims to get into the playoff? I am not in any way arguing that Florida State was the best team or that they would have won a national championship. No, I'm simply claiming that Florida State earned the right to be in the playoff. And so I am not awarding Florida State a national championship by any stretch, but I am simply going to notate that Florida State was undefeated and they earned a playoff spot. They had a conference championship. They were undefeated. They should have been in the playoff and should have been awarded the opportunity to play for a national championship. First notation in our national championship reset is that Florida State got ripped off in 2023. And again, I've been through this a few times, and I realize that all sorts of people are going to comment that Florida State wasn't good enough to win the national championship, or they wouldn't have beaten Alabama or Washington or Texas or any of these teams, Michigan. to win a national championship. That's not my argument. My argument is that they won a conference championship and they were 13-0, and there were two teams that were allowed to play in the playoff with one loss, and Florida State earned a spot in the playoff. Okay. And that should be notated. I'm not giving Florida State a national championship. The other issue with 2023 is obviously Michigan. So we're not going to delve into that fiasco and that set of shenanigans off the field. We're going to allow the NCAA to do its due diligence, and hopefully they will find the bottom of the pit, and they are in the process, obviously, and have been for the last year and a half of filtering through all that mess to try to figure out what justice is. So I can't, and I'm not going to take that on right now. I've taken it on about 50,000 times. So we're not going to delve into the Michigan mess. We are simply going to take their results on the field as being valid and that they won the national championship, but that Florida State was denied an opportunity to win the national championship. So that's all we've got for 2023. When we go back to 2022, of course, this is the season in which Georgia decimated TCU 65-7 in the national championship game. And of course, Michigan came close to making the national championship game, and Ohio State missed a field goal. Otherwise, they most likely would have won the national championship game. However, Georgia, of course, won it easily. So no issue there, and really no issue across the board. There are some who could say, well, TCU made the playoff. They did not win the Big 12. So understand that two of the four teams that made the playoff in 2022 did not win their conference, TCU and Ohio State. Kansas State, after winning the Big 12 championship, they have Kansas State at 10-3. Okay, so that's the final going into the playoff. Yes. Okay. So that's correct. Kansas State was 10-3. Can't have a 3-loss team in the playoff. Okay. I was thinking that was the final rankings after Kansas State lost to Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. So really nothing here to contend with. Clemson won a conference. Kansas State won a conference, but they did not have the type of resumes that came anywhere close to challenging for the college football playoff. So the playoff committee got it right. Those were the four teams, and Georgia won the national championship. Nothing to debate in 2022. And again, if you do for any of these seasons, give me a call. The call-in link is there in the chat, and we will leave it here again. But do not call about anything except for national championship races, and please comment on the season that we are in. As we move on to 2021, for some reason, our link did not copy. We are at least going to make it through the college football playoff era tonight, and maybe further. We'll see. Let's go back to 2021. And again, this is rather mundane early on, but it's going to get juicy here in about 10 years. So in 2021, we had this for the college football playoff. So the committee had a rather easy decision to make here with Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, and Cincinnati. Of course, Alabama beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, and Cincinnati made it. Why did they make it? Well, they had the fortune of being able to play Notre Dame. In any other season, if Cincinnati's playing in the American Conference and they don't schedule the likes of Notre Dame, and Notre Dame doesn't go 11-1. Now, if Notre Dame would have gone 8-4 and Cincinnati beat them, I don't think Cincinnati makes the playoff. One of those other teams would have made the playoff. But Cincinnati got the opportunity, and just the irony of it is kind of comical that Notre Dame was undefeated otherwise, but they played Cincinnati at home, and the Bearcats were better than Notre Dame. And so they, I guess, earned the right, even though the rest of their schedule doesn't come close. I can't offer another team that earned it more than Cincinnati. Do I think Ohio State was better, Notre Dame was better, Baylor was better, Ole Miss was better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Certainly those four teams. But Cincinnati went undefeated. They won their conference. They beat Notre Dame on the road. They earned the spot. And then, of course, Georgia went on to win the national championship game over Alabama. And we've got really no other notes to make there other than Cincinnati's schedule was horrendous in comparison to the teams that they played in the playoff and in comparison to the teams below them. Of course, Oklahoma State came within inches of making the playoff because they lost the Big 12 championship game at the goal line to Baylor. Otherwise, Oklahoma State would have been 12-1 and would have made the playoff as the 4 seed. But that's not what happened. So we've got a clear-cut situation in 2021. Now, let's go to the fun year of 2020. This particular year, we're not going to mess with this because Alabama was far and away the best team in the country. Now, a lot of people would tell you that Ohio State did not earn a playoff spot because they only played 6 games. They won the Big Ten championship game, and again, they were 6-0. And who would you have elevated? Texas A&M lost to Alabama by 4 touchdowns. Oklahoma lost the first 2 games of the season. They did win the Big 12. Then you got Cincinnati at 9-0, but of course they're not playing the caliber football that Ohio State is in the Big Ten. So it was just an odd year, odd situation. And there you go. Alabama throttled Notre Dame, and Ohio State throttled Clemson, and Alabama throttled Ohio State, and Alabama was the clear national champion. Again, I know Jimbo Fisher complained about not making the playoff, and his team was 8-1, and Ohio State was 6-0. Is it that grave of a difference? His team played 9 games. Well, there were other teams that played 11 games. So the difference between the number of games you played and other teams is generally the same as the difference between your number of games and Ohio State's number of games. So really nothing to go on here. You know, we had Coastal Carolina went 11-0 as well as Cincinnati at 9-0, but just a mess of a year. But it's funny that in such a mess of a year, look who made the playoff. It is a very standard playoff season. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame. So there's 2020. Nothing to notate, nothing to change there. All right, we go back to 2019. The heck? It's not allowing me to go all the way over. All right. You see, I don't know what the problem is here on the bottom. But regardless, we've got LSU, Ohio State, and Clemson were all 13-0. And this is a clear-cut playoff decision. Those 3 teams obviously made it. Well, Oklahoma only had 1 loss, and they won the Big 12 conference. Now, were they the 4th best team? I don't believe so. And I think they showed that in the playoff. I think Alabama was the 4th best team. They were like number 13 in the country, and eventually they beat Michigan in the Citrus Bowl and finished 11-2. They lost to Auburn on 2 pick sixes and they lost a classic game to Joe Burrow and LSU 46-41. So not a lot of controversy here. No real claim for anyone outside of Oklahoma to have made the playoff. And of course, LSU marched on to the national championship game and won it by 17. So nothing to note in 2020. On to 2018 with just a smidgen of controversy, not anything too crazy, but again, a smidgen of controversy. So my issue here is that Notre Dame doesn't play in a conference. Notre Dame played one less game. Well, Alabama in, Clemson in. And this hit me while I was watching the Big 12 championship game at noon, Oklahoma and Texas, and thinking, Oklahoma is about to win this game against Texas. And even at that point, Texas was within range to pull off the upset, and they had already defeated Oklahoma. They handed Oklahoma their lone loss. And I was thinking, if Oklahoma loses this game, they had to play this game. Notre Dame didn't have to play today. And so what it turned out to be is basically, even though Georgia's there at number 5, as I see it, Ohio State and Oklahoma tied for the final spot. They were both 12-1 in major conferences. Oklahoma had the advantage of getting the rematch and being able to get revenge on Texas and prove that they could beat the team that they lost to. And they lost a really good game to Texas, where Ohio State got throttled by Purdue. And that's what knocked them out of the playoff. They looked awful, and they lost by 4 touchdowns to a marginal Purdue team that finished 6-7. However, Ohio State had better wins than Oklahoma. So I have no issue with the selection of Oklahoma over Ohio State. I would have had no issue with Ohio State being selected over Oklahoma. I think you could make an easy case for either team. The one team that needs to be noted here is UCF. This is the next notation we need to make in 2018, is that UCF was 12-0 and Oklahoma was 12-1. And I'm not saying that UCF should have been in the playoff, but they did everything within their power to make the playoff. They went 12-0. They won the American Conference. So that should be a footnote in history that UCF had no opportunity to play in the playoff despite being 12-0. What else could they do? What else could they do? And it's kind of odd that here we are in 2018 and Notre Dame makes the playoff at 12-0. UCF misses the playoff at 12-0. And all of 3 seasons later, Notre Dame's missing the playoff at 11-1 because they lost to the American Conference champion, Cincinnati. Cincinnati, UCF, 2018, UCF, 2021, Cincinnati. You see a parallel? Okay. Otherwise, Alabama is the national champion. No, we're in 2018. Clemson, of course, beat Alabama to win the national championship. Back to 2017. Got a bit of an issue here, and that's that Alabama went to the playoff as a non-division winner. So I do have some issue with this. Clemson in, Oklahoma, Georgia in. They are the champions of those conferences. Very good. Okay, Alabama finished 11-1. They lost the wrong game. They lost to Auburn. This is, yes, 2017. Alabama lost to Auburn. That moved Auburn into the SEC championship game despite them having a record of 10-2. So Alabama 11-1, Auburn 10-2, but Auburn beat Alabama head-to-head, and Auburn lost a non-conference game to Clemson. So Auburn was the SEC Western Division representative in the championship game, not Alabama. Ohio State won the Big Ten. They lost to Oklahoma and Iowa. They got throttled by Iowa by 31 points. That's what knocked them out of the playoff, kept them at number 5. Wisconsin could have made the playoff as the Big Ten Western Division champion at 12-0, but they lost to Ohio State by 6 in Indianapolis in the Big Ten championship game. So you had a number of scenarios there where Wisconsin could have knocked out Alabama by winning the Big Ten championship game. Auburn could have knocked out Alabama by, that would have been a tough call, because if Auburn won the SEC championship game, that would have knocked down Georgia to 11-2. Do you put in Georgia 11-2 SEC championship game participant over Bama 11-1? Probably, if it was a close game. So Ohio State's got an argument, but it's pretty weak. Wisconsin has an argument that they won a division championship. Alabama did not. They were 12-0 in the regular season. Alabama was not. Wisconsin then had to go play one of the best teams in the country and lost by 6. But I'm not going to go too crazy about this situation in 2017 because nobody really had a clear-cut argument. I think it's basically those teams. Ohio State and Wisconsin had arguments. And Bama, of course, did not win a division. So Bama does not win the SEC West nor the SEC, and they go on and win the national championship. Not going to play around with that, though. It's fine. Oh. Am I missing? Yeah. Edward, thank you for that. I'm glad I checked on that. Glad I checked the chat. I forgot about, because they got ranked so low, I forgot about UCF 12-0. So I love this scenario. So go down the list. You see at number 12, UCF 12-0. UCF denied a chance to compete for the national championship. What else were they supposed to do? They won the American. They went 12-0. And what I love about this scenario is that UCF's undefeated. They get left out. Alabama goes instead. Auburn beat Alabama. Auburn loses in the SEC championship game. UCF beats Auburn, who beat Alabama. They actually beat them in the same building as the SEC championship game. Yes, UCF got ripped off 2 consecutive years, 2017 and 18. Ripped off in a sense. I'm not claiming that they were a better team or that they even had a better resume, but they were undefeated. They were undefeated. So, Edward, thank you for catching that. I was going through that thinking something back here was like, something's not right. You're missing something. Oh, yeah. I've only talked about this about 1 million times in my life. UCF getting screwed in 2017 and 18. But I'm not going to award UCF a national championship based on being undefeated when they would have had to play, Clemson and Oklahoma, let's say, or Georgia. No, but it's worth a footnote in history in my national championship reset notes. 2016, So you've got here in 2016, you've got the Ohio State-Washington argument. I'm sorry, the Ohio State-Penn State argument. Ohio State 11-1, Penn State 11-2. So on the side of Penn State is won the head-to-head, 24-21 in Happy Valley, won the conference. That is the pro-Penn State argument. Won the conference, won head-to-head. The pro-Ohio State argument is that they had the better record, 11-1, and they went outside the conference, unlike Penn State, and played one of the best teams in the country, Oklahoma, and won by 3 scores. So Ohio State challenged themselves by going outside the conference, beating Oklahoma by 3 touchdowns, and Ohio State actually also had the more difficult cross-division game. They went to Wisconsin that year, and they beat Wisconsin, who, as you can see, finished number 8 after the Big Ten championship game. I've got a video, and I'm on record here making the argument for Penn State, that I believe Penn State should have been in the playoff above Ohio State. Regardless, it didn't much matter. Alabama and Clemson were way better than everybody else. They played an epic national championship game, and Hunter Renfrow scored with 1 second left, and Clemson won its first national championship since 1981 and beat Bama. So 2016, my note is simply that Penn State had an argument. On to 2015. Yeah, 2015 was a crazy year. Not that there was much to argue about the playoff selections, but how we arrived at this place. Clemson and Alabama safely in. Michigan State safely in. But man, that was a wobbly season for Michigan State. Boy, they hung on by a wire. They lost to a 5-7 Nebraska team. Is Michigan State the only team to make the college football playoff having lost to a team with a losing record? Losing record in the regular season. That could be. That could be. We'll have to figure that one out. So Michigan State loses to 5-7 Nebraska. They win in the rain in Columbus on the final play of the game, 16-13, 13-10, whatever the score was, 17-14. And then what's crazy about this situation in 2015 is that Bama only made the SEC championship game. After losing to Ole Miss, they only made it to the SEC championship game because Ole Miss was at Arkansas. They were about to win the game. Arkansas had a 4th and 29. Have you seen the play? 2015 Arkansas Ole Miss. Look it up. So Arkansas is on its last leg. It's an overtime game. They've got a 4th and 29. They've got to score to tie or win the game. They are losing 51-43, 51-44. And so the Arkansas quarterback, I can't think of his name right now. He was there for a long time. He was their starting quarterback for a few years, and actually his brother played there too. Anyway, he hits Hunter Henry on an out route at the sideline, and Hunter Henry, smart ball player, smart play, knew hey, I just caught this football and I'm about to step out of bounds and the game's over because I've not reached the first down marker, throws the ball over his head, just whips the ball up over his head. It lands on the turf and there's a mad scramble for it. And it kicks out some way to, was it Jonathan Williams or Alfred Collins? Those two players were the premier 1-2 combo for Arkansas in the backfield. And I don't get them confused. I know who is who, but in regards to this particular play, I get them confused about who made the play. It was one of the two. I think it was Alex Collins. Picks up the ball and scampers in for the game-winning touchdown. And I believe the extra point won the game for Arkansas. I don't believe they had to go for two because I would remember that 2-point conversion. I think Ole Miss went for two. Arkansas won the game 52-51 in one of the craziest finishes you will ever see, at least until the finish in Ann Arbor that allowed Michigan State to go to the Big Ten championship game with only one loss, because otherwise Sparty would have had two losses. They're losing to Michigan, final seconds of the game. All the Michigan punter has to do is not catch the ball and punt the ball. He doesn't have to punt the ball. He just has to hold the ball. Think about that. The punter does not even have to get off the kick. Just has to hold on to the football, get tackled, time's going to run out, and Michigan wins. But no, he inexplicably, like Garo Yepremian, just flips the ball up in the air, and Michigan State picks it off, runs it all the way. And the kid who scored the game-winning touchdown broke his leg on the tackle as he was making his way into the end zone, and Michigan State wins that crazy game at the Big House. That ushers Michigan State into the Big Ten championship game. Now, we didn't know it at the time. This is like mid to late October, but that is the game that sealed it, because otherwise, even with Michigan State's win in Columbus, Ohio State would have gone to the Big Ten championship game and most likely would have throttled Iowa and been in the playoff to defend its national championship. But that's not the way it rolled. So Alabama benefits from a crazy play that they have no control over. They were not there at the stadium playing the game. They benefit from that. They get to Atlanta. They win the SEC. They go on to the playoff and win the national championship. Ohio State is cursed by a play that doesn't involve them in another stadium, and they get knocked out of the national championship or the Big Ten championship game. That said, this all played out as it should in regards to the playoff teams selected and the playoff seedings. Now, if you would have gone with best team, then Ohio State was better than Michigan State. Stanford was probably better than Michigan State. However, those are the teams that earned it on the field of four conference champions. Stanford lost to Notre Dame in excruciating fashion late in their final regular season game. Otherwise, it would have been Stanford at 12-1, probably getting the nod over Oklahoma, who did not play in a conference championship game because there was no Big 12 title game then. So that's pretty clear cut. Clemson's the winner. It was just a crazy series of events that led to the teams that made and missed the playoffs. But in terms of the playoff selections and the teams that won, and Clemson finally, not Clemson, I keep seeing Clemson at number one, thinking they won the national championship. Of course, Alabama won 45-40 over Clemson. All right, I'm still checking the chat. We got no questions or comments by way of super chat or otherwise, so I will keep rolling. And again, the call-in line is available. (2014), the first year of the college football playoff. Now, we know what the controversy here was. Which I don't completely agree with, because a lot of people pit Ohio State against Baylor and TCU? Why not Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State against Baylor and TCU? Because all of those teams won their conference championships and finished with one loss. Florida State's in. They're 13-0. They played a ragged season. They scraped by just about everybody on their schedule that year, but they did it and they made it. So Florida State's a no-brainer, 13-0, although you can see based on their level of play and their number of close calls and just not being very impressive and not playing a difficult schedule, that's why they were number 3 in the seedings. And the Big 12 just really screwed up because they did not have a championship game. They also did not have a way to determine the definitive conference champion. So that's what's going to happen. So the committee had an easy decision to make when Ohio State played an extra game. And that extra game was against the 13th ranked team in the country, and they beat them 59-0. So then, of course, the Buckeyes won the national championship. So really nothing there, except I do note that Baylor and TCU had one loss as well, and they tied for the Big 12 championship. But I do not believe in any way that they have much of an argument. Since, folks, we've got a small little gathering here tonight, I know that this live stream was called rather late, that we will wrap it up right there because I wanted to at least get back to 2014. Now, these are going to be much more interesting in the future. Hopefully, we'll get to do one of these here in the next, let's say, week. And as we go back in time, it's going to get messy and interesting and argumentative. We just did the CFP seasons, so that's pretty easy to determine. So we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football for the National Championship Reset. Again, we ask you when you shop online on Amazon that you would use the link that we provide. It's the one way that you can contribute to the Voice of College Football financially without spending a penny. All right, so that's our first National Championship Reset live stream, 2014 through 24. We will be back here in the next week or so with another National Championship Reset as we go 2013 backwards. Appreciate you being here. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you, if not sooner, we will see you Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Yes, Baylor beat TCU. They came back from a large deficit and they won an extremely high-scoring game. I can't remember the numbers. It was like 63-58. B-Beam, good to see you. And yes, we will be back with another one of these. Hopefully people will make it next time. And again, I apologize for the late notification, but my schedule opened up and we had to cancel the On the Move show for tonight. So I thought we would get this rolling tonight with our first edition of National Championship Reset. And to date, we have reset nothing. But in the college football playoff era, we are noting that Michigan obviously is in the midst of a scandal in 2023. We will put that on hold. Also in 2023, that Florida State was denied the opportunity that they earned to play for national championship. That in 2018, UCF was 12-0. They were denied an opportunity to play for the national championship at 12-0. They did everything they could under their power. And ironically, 3 years later, Cincinnati in the same situation beat Notre Dame. And so there was an American Conference team in a 14 playoff. In 2017, UCF again denied 12-0. And ironically, of course, beat Auburn, who beat Bama, who won the national championship in the same stadium. And then, of course, Ohio State and Wisconsin had arguments over Bama as either a team with a better record in the case of Wisconsin or a team with a conference championship in the case of Ohio State over Bama. 2016, Penn State, we outlined that argument over Ohio State. making the playoff. And in 2014, of course, it's Baylor and TCU at 11-0, 11-1. Baylor won the matchup head-to-head. Baylor lost at West Virginia that year. They were the Big 12 co-champions, and we outlined that argument against Ohio State, Oregon, and Bama. We'll be back to do 2013. Please like the video. Please subscribe. Turn on the bell for the notifications to know when we go live, because we love to do these national championship resets, and we're going to go through the entirety of college football history.